Have you ever watched someone disappear from your life? Why some people disappear? The mystery of disappearing, without ever understanding why. Not physically. You know they're still somewhere out there. They are still waking up, still going to work, still using their phone, still living their life. But somehow, they have disappeared from your life. One day, you are talking like everything is normal. You laugh together. You share stories. You tell them things you don't tell everyone else. Maybe you even make plans for the future. Then something changes. Their replies become slower. Their messages become shorter. The warmth in their words begins to disappear. And then one day, nothing. No explanation. No argument. No goodbye. Just silence. At first, you tell yourself not to overthink it. They're probably busy. Then you check your phone again. Nothing. Maybe something happened. Another day passes. Still nothing. Then your mind begins asking questions. Did I do something? Did I say something wrong? Did I become too much? Did they find someone else? Did they ever really care? And perhaps the most painful question of all, why wasn't I worth an explanation? That question can stay with a person for a very long time. Because when someone leaves clearly, you can understand the ending. But when someone disappears without explanation, your mind is left standing in the middle of the story. There is no final chapter. There is no conclusion. There is only a blank page. And human beings don't like blank pages. We want explanations. We want reasons. We want things to make sense. When something doesn't make sense, the brain begins searching for patterns. It takes small details and connects them. It remembers conversations. It analyzes messages. It examines behavior. It searches for clues that may have been invisible at the time. You remember something they said 3 months ago. You remember the way they looked at you. You remember that one conversation that suddenly feels important. You ask yourself, was that the moment everything changed? Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. And that's the problem. You don't know. This is what makes disappearing so psychologically powerful. The person may be gone, but the relationship continues inside your mind. You continue the conversation alone. You imagine what you would say if they returned. You imagine asking them why. You imagine them explaining everything. You imagine them apologizing. Sometimes you imagine yourself refusing to forgive them. Other times you imagine hugging them and pretending nothing happened. You create hundreds of possible endings, but none of them are real. They are possibilities created by a mind desperately searching for certainty. And this is where something important happens. When we don't know why someone disappeared, we often create a story that makes the disappearance about ourselves. I wasn't good enough. I talked too much. I cared too much. I wasn't attractive enough. I wasn't successful enough. Maybe they got tired of me. Sometimes that story is true, but often we simply don't have enough information to know. And there is a huge difference between knowing something and assuming something. Yet when we are emotionally hurt, assumptions can feel like facts. That's why someone else's silence can slowly become a judgment against ourselves. They stopped responding, and suddenly we start questioning our entire identity. That is a dangerous place to live, because one person's decision can become the lens through which we see ourselves. But another person's decision does not define your value. Someone can leave you and you can still be worthy. Someone can reject you and you can still be lovable. Someone can lose interest and you can still be an extraordinary person. Someone can misunderstand you and you can still know who you are. The disappearance may say something about the relationship. It may say something about them. It may even say something about something you did. But it does not automatically define who you are. Let's imagine a simple situation. You have a friend. You have known each other for years. You speak every week. You help each other. Then, gradually your friend becomes distant. You send a message. No answer. You call. No answer. A week later you see them online. They are posting pictures. They are talking to other people. They appear completely fine. And now the pain becomes deeper. Because you realize, they are not unable to communicate. They are choosing not to communicate with me. That realization can hurt more than the silence itself. Because now you have evidence that they are active. Just not with you. And your mind immediately asks, why? Maybe they are angry. Maybe they are tired of the friendship. Maybe they heard something about you. Maybe someone influenced them. Maybe they have another group of friends. Maybe they don't need you anymore. Again, the possibilities are endless. And that is exactly why uncertainty can be so exhausting. If someone tells you, I don't want to be friends anymore, you might cry. You might become angry. You might feel rejected. But eventually, you have a reality you can work with. When someone disappears, however, you don't know whether to grieve or wait. You don't know whether to move on or expect them to return. You don't know whether to apologize or leave them alone. You don't know whether the relationship is over or simply paused. So you remain emotionally stuck between two worlds. And sometimes that is more painful than an actual ending. Psychologists often talk about our need for closure. Closure is not simply knowing what happened. It is the feeling that a situation has been psychologically completed. When there is no clear ending, the mind can continue returning to it. Think about a song that stops halfway through. You know something is missing. Or imagine reading a story where the final chapter has been removed. You might continue thinking about what happened. You might create your own ending. You might even argue with other people about what you think the ending should have been. Relationships can work the same way. When someone disappears without explanation, your mind wants to complete the story. And because you cannot ask them, you begin asking yourself. That's why you may suddenly remember the relationship while driving, while eating, while working, before sleeping. You may wake up thinking about them. You may hear a song that reminds you of them. You may visit a familiar place and suddenly feel everything again. The relationship is no longer happening in reality, but it continues happening in memory. And memory has a strange quality. It doesn't simply preserve the past. It can rewrite it. After someone disappears, you may remember mostly the good moments, the laughter, the late-night conversations, the kindness, the moments when they made you feel special. You may forget the moments when they disappointed you, the arguments, the distance, the times you felt uncertain. Why? Because when something is lost, the mind often idealizes it. We begin missing the person we wanted them to be, rather than the person they actually were. This is an important distinction. You might say, they were perfect, but were they? Or are you remembering the best version of them because you miss how you felt when things were good? Maybe they were wonderful in many ways. Maybe the relationship was genuinely meaningful. But meaningful does not mean perfect. And losing something meaningful doesn't mean you have to turn it into something imaginary. You can appreciate what was good, while still accepting what was unhealthy. You can love the memories, without trying to recreate the past. You can miss someone, without needing them back. That is emotional maturity. But there is another side to disappearance that we need to consider. Sometimes people don't disappear because they stopped caring. Sometimes they disappear because they are struggling. Imagine someone carrying a huge amount of stress. Their job is becoming difficult. Money is tight. Their family needs them. They are worried about the future. They are disappointed in themselves. They don't know what to do next. From the outside, they may look normal. They might post online. They might smile when they see people. They might go to work every day. But internally, they may feel completely exhausted. And when emotional energy becomes low, social connection can become difficult. Answering a message requires energy. Explaining how you feel requires energy. Listening to someone else's problems requires energy. Even saying, "I'm okay," can become exhausting when you know you're not okay. So some people withdraw. They stop answering. They stop calling. They stay alone. They disappear, not because they hate everyone, but because they don't know how to carry their own problems while also maintaining relationships. Some people were also raised to handle everything alone. They were taught, be strong, don't complain, don't depend on people, solve your own problems. So when life becomes difficult, they don't reach out. They disappear. This doesn't necessarily make disappearing healthy. Communication is still important. If someone needs space, they can say, "I'm going through something. I may be quiet for a while." That one sentence can prevent another person from spending weeks wondering what happened. But not everyone has learned how to communicate like that. Some people don't even understand what they are feeling themselves. They know they are tired. They know they want to be alone. But they don't know how to explain why. So silence becomes their language. And then there is another possibility. Sometimes, the disappearance really is about the relationship. Sometimes people lose interest. Sometimes their feelings change. Sometimes they realize they don't want the same future. Sometimes they meet someone else. Sometimes they simply decide they don't want to continue. And instead of having an honest conversation, they disappear. This is painful, but it is important to acknowledge. Not every disappearance has a deep psychological explanation. Sometimes the explanation is simply, they don't want to continue. And that can be one of the hardest truths to accept. Because when we care about someone, we naturally want a more complicated reason. We want there to be a hidden problem. We want to believe, if I understand what happened, maybe I can fix it. But what if there is nothing to fix? What if the person simply changed their mind? What if their feelings changed? What if they no longer want the relationship? That doesn't mean you failed. People's feelings are not contracts. Someone can genuinely care about you. and later realize they want something different. Someone can mean every beautiful thing they said, and still eventually walk away. This is one of the uncomfortable truths about relationships. Something can be real and still end. A friendship can be real and still end. Love can be real and still end. Trust can be real and still disappear. A beautiful chapter doesn't become fake simply because the book continued without it. And perhaps that is where many people get stuck. They think, if they loved me, they wouldn't leave. But human beings are more complicated than that. People leave relationships they once cared deeply about. People leave because their needs change. People leave because they change. People leave because circumstances change. People leave because they don't know how to stay. And sometimes people leave because staying would require them to become someone they are not ready to become. None of this makes the pain disappear. But understanding complexity can prevent you from turning the entire experience into a simple story of, I wasn't enough. You don't always need to know why someone left to know what you should do next. Look at the behavior. If someone consistently chooses distance, accept the distance. If someone repeatedly refuses communication, stop forcing communication. If someone clearly tells you they don't want contact, respect the boundary. If someone disappears temporarily and later returns with a genuine explanation, you can decide whether rebuilding trust makes sense. But don't build your entire emotional life around waiting, because waiting can quietly become a prison. You wake up thinking, maybe today they'll message. You go to sleep thinking, maybe tomorrow. Weeks become months, and without realizing it, you are giving someone who is absent control over your present. That's the moment when you have to take your power back, not by becoming cold, not by pretending you don't care, not by trying to hurt them back, but by accepting reality. You can say, I miss them, and still move forward. You can say, I wish they had explained, and still move forward. You can say, I don't understand why they left, and still move forward. Those things can exist together. Healing does not mean you suddenly stop caring. Healing means caring no longer controls you. And here's another important lesson. Don't make a permanent conclusion about yourself based on a temporary event. Someone disappearing from your life does not mean everyone will disappear. One failed relationship doesn't mean you are incapable of love. One broken friendship doesn't mean you are impossible to understand. One person's rejection doesn't mean you are unworthy. Sometimes we take one person's decision and turn it into a prophecy about our entire future. If they left, everyone will leave. No, that's pain talking, not reality. The truth is, relationships are uncertain. You will meet people. Some will stay. Some will leave. Some will teach you. Some will hurt you. Some will love you deeply. Some will misunderstand you. Some will become lifelong friends. Others will become memories. You cannot control all of that, but you can control how you treat yourself through it. So if someone has disappeared from your life, before you blame yourself, stop. Take a breath. Look at what you actually know. Not what you fear. Not what you imagine. Not what you hope. What do you actually know? You know they became distant. You know they stopped communicating. You know you don't have the explanation you wanted. That's it. Everything beyond that may be speculation. And sometimes peace begins when you stop turning speculation into truth. Maybe they were hurting. Maybe they were changing. Maybe they were afraid. Maybe they stopped caring. Maybe they were never capable of giving you the relationship you wanted. Maybe you made mistakes. Maybe they made mistakes. Maybe both of you did. Human relationships are rarely completely black and white. There are usually shades of gray. And sometimes, you will never know the entire picture. But there is something you can know. You can know how you want to live from this point forward. You can choose not to chase people who repeatedly choose distance. You can choose to communicate more honestly. You can choose to appreciate people while they're present. You can choose to notice when a relationship becomes one-sided. You can choose boundaries. You can choose self-respect. And most importantly, you can choose not to disappear from your own life because someone else disappeared from yours. Think about that. Sometimes, when someone leaves, we spend so much time thinking about where they went that we forget to ask where we are going. We stop pursuing our goals. We stop enjoying things. We stop meeting people. We stop trusting. We become emotionally frozen in the place where someone left us. But your life is still moving. The world is still moving. There are still mornings you haven't seen, places you haven't visited, people you haven't met, dreams you haven't built, versions of yourself you haven't discovered. The person who disappeared may have been an important part of your story, but they do not own the rest of it. Maybe you will eventually get the explanation. Maybe they will return. Maybe they will apologize. Maybe they will tell you exactly what happened. Or maybe you will never hear from them again. And although that possibility hurts, you can survive it. Because closure doesn't always come from the person who left. Sometimes closure comes from you. It comes from saying, I don't know why this happened. I wish it had ended differently, but I refuse to spend the rest of my life trapped inside a question. Some people disappear because they are hurting. Some disappear because they are changing. Some disappear because they no longer want to stay. Some disappear because they don't know how to say goodbye. And some disappear because they were never meant to remain forever. But whatever the reason, their disappearance does not have to become your destruction. It can become your lesson. It can teach you about attachment. It can teach you about boundaries. It can teach you about communication. It can teach you about the difference between loving someone and losing yourself trying to keep them. And perhaps the biggest lesson is this. You don't need to understand why someone left in order to decide that you deserve peace. Because sometimes the question isn't, why did they disappear? Sometimes the real question is, why am I still disappearing from my own life trying to find them? And that question changes everything.